think it's time we talk about some programs here that are set to take the next step in the college football landscape. Every single year, we see some team make some noise late November to championship weekend. Really what you have to do in the 4-team playoff, historically, if you win your conference, scratch that. If you have one loss at the end of the regular season, at the end of conference championship weekend, you have a pretty good chance to make the college football playoff. Some years are easier than others, but what are some teams that could be the TCU that we saw this year, or teams like Cincinnati that we saw the year before? Who could be that team that is set to take the next step? Got a couple of them for you. Going to throw them at you. The college football playoff championship odds came out. Teams that are, potentially going to win the national championship. We got odds from BetMGM that are out right now. Going to throw them at you. I got a list of teams here. Like I said, we waste no time. Tennessee is currently at plus 3,000 odds, and I think they are very poised to take the next step. They were in year 2 last year under Josh Heupel, 11 wins. Orange Bowl champs. Now, Hendon Hooker, he goes to the NFL. I think for Tennessee to take the next step, there's a couple of things that I'm looking at here. One, Joe Milton, right? Like Joe Milton has to be a version of what we saw in the Orange Bowl. If Joe Milton can be Orange Bowl Joe and be consistent with his decision-making and be accurate and prove that's who he is now, and the defense can get 5% better. Notice, I didn't say the defense has to be just the number 1 defense in the country and they have to be locked down on the back end. If they can get 5% better and be a little bit more shored up on the back end, because they allowed 287 yards a game passing last year. That's not great. They can get a little bit better and allow this offense some time to grow. I feel pretty good about their chances. Now, the big next step, the big games that you watch are Georgia and Alabama. If you can split those, I feel pretty good about your chances. Because a one-loss Tennessee, and if that one loss is to Georgia or Alabama, it's not a bad loss to have. As the verbiage goes, and we hate saying this, but a good loss. Those are what's up for one of the best losses in the country. And if that had been the case this year, that would have been enough. Now, you would like to still win the SEC. You'd love to go undefeated. But to me, I think that's the path for you. Joe Milton, be consistent. Defense improve just a little bit, especially in the secondary. Split Georgia, Alabama. That, to me, would qualify them for the next step and put them very squarely in the college football playoff conversation. If you're not yet subscribed, we would love to have you at the party. This is a college football community that y'all have allowed us to cultivate here. We got the mic, we got the camera, we got the studio, and Nick Brake lifting heavy, but this is something that y'all have built, that we have built together. We're very grateful for it. So if you haven't yet joined the party, we'd love to have you. Also, follow me on the socials at JD Piquel on Twitter and on Instagram. Another team that I believe is very much so poised to take the next step. How about the Florida State Seminoles? Plus 2,500 odds right now to win the national championship. Went 10-3 last season. To me, the thing that has to happen for them is they need to win the ACC and beat Clemson. Now, that is very much so easier said than done, but if we're charting the course, I think that would give me some more encouragement around them making the college football playoff. Because to be the best, you got to beat the best. You got to slay the dragon if you want to claim the castle. And how they would do that to me is Jordan Travis taking the next step. Because Jordan Travis coming into this year, I will be the first to say it, I was not a believer. I wasn't out on him, but I was not yet a believer. And you heard all these murmurs around he's had a great spring, he had a great fall, man, he's taken enormous strides. To be fair, everybody says that about their quarterback during those periods of the year. Just turned out that Jordan Travis really did take those next steps. And so for me, if he could continue that progression and continue that trend upward and take even another step forward, be even more efficient with the football, be even more explosive as an offense, I think that would be one of the key things that has to happen. Because last year, Florida State scored right around 35 points a game. That's really good. You look at some of these offenses that are competing in the college football playoff, your Michigans, your Georgias, your Ohio States, those teams are all scoring right around 40. And so for Florida State, if they can score 38 to 40 points a game, that to me is the magic number. Now, the other piece of this, obviously, on the defensive side, I need them to be a little bit better in the trenches. Last year, they averaged on the ground, giving up around 162 yards a game. Talking about the playoff teams, the Georgias, Ohio State outside of Michigan, the Michigans, they were good in the trenches. They're tough in the trenches. Also, they have some depth in the trenches. So for Florida State, they're doing a lot in the portal right now. If they can stay healthy, I think they've got the makeup to be much better in the trenches. I don't think it's a personnel thing. I think it's a depth thing, which they're doing, like I said, in the portal. Jared Verse coming back for another year. That's huge. That, to me, is the other ingredient. Explosive offenses, tough defensive lines. Those are what get you pretty far. Doesn't do everything for you, but it gets you pretty far. I'll say this. I think their roster is in a place where they can win the ACC. Can they stay healthy? And can Jordan Travis take another step to propel them? Because like I said, winning the ACC with one loss, you beat Clemson, that would be, I think, a very realistic picture you could paint for Florida State. I'm not even asking you to go undefeated. Just beat Clemson. Just beat Clemson. Beat Clemson, win the ACC. If you do it with a loss, great. If you're undefeated, even better. But I think that's a very realistic path that you could chart for them. Another team we got to talk about. Plus 3,000 odds. How about the Penn State Nittany Lions, Rose Bowl champs Nittany Lions? Now, Sean Clifford is, I believe, fresh out of eligibility. Like, Sean Clifford has worn out the eligibility and maxed it out, and he is a legend forever at State College. Him taking that bow at the Rose Bowl was one of the most beautiful, poetic college football moments we've ever seen, for me at least. However, for them now, they enter into the Drew Aller era. And I was talking to Charles Power, director of scouting and ranks for On3, one of the smartest football individuals you will ever talk to, charts all of these kids from the high school level all the way up until the draft, and he is very high on Penn State, as am I. And one of the things that I think was interesting that Charles said is they're in a year where a lot of their top talent will cycle up. Now, what does he mean by that? They have guys like Nick Singleton, Abdul Carter, Katron Allen, where they're all going to get a year further along in their development process. They get a whole nother offseason to work on the speed, to get more comfortable in the system, to get some more size on them. They're in a special place where they're going to get developed and now have a chance to translate it onto the field. And it's marrying up perfectly where it's a lot of the roster cycling up at the right time. Sometimes you get one or two guys cycling up in terms of, like I just said, the maturation and development happens for another year, but they're in a place where a lot of the top talent will cycle up together. I mean, Nick Singleton might be one of the best backs in the country. I think it all comes down to, in terms of how you feel about Penn State, I think it all comes down to, is Drew Aller as good as advertised? I think that's it, because on paper, you bring in a more talented quarterback. I did not say a better quarterback. But in terms of physical tools, in terms of just what God gave him, Drew Aller has a little bit more of that than what Sean Clifford had. Now, Sean Clifford was really effective because he made good decisions, was a great leader, was gritty as heck, and that experience paid off for him. Drew Aller doesn't have that experience just yet. But if he can fast track that and get comfortable in this offense quickly, he's got all the tools to be really dangerous, to make this Penn State offense really dangerous. The test for me, for them, is, can you split Michigan and Ohio State? If you split them, that at least gives you a chance. If you win both, similar to what I said about Florida State beating Clemson and what I said about Tennessee beating Georgia or Bama, if you could win those games, I mean, obviously going undefeated, you got, your shot at the gauntlet. If you can split those, though, I don't think it's unrealistic to think you have a chance to find yourself in the college football playoff. I mean, look at Ohio State. They lost to Michigan, last game of the year, but that was their only loss, and it was a good loss. If Penn State finds themselves in the same situation where they have a loss to Ohio State but they beat Michigan, or vice versa, it's not a bad loss to tote. We are, I think, getting further and further from the days where we just see 4 undefeated teams end up in the college football playoff. I don't think that's really going to happen here anytime soon. So a one-loss Penn State to one of those teams, winning the Big Ten title, which would be a nice cherry on top, I'm telling you, I think Penn State's an exciting team to watch. Keep an eye on the Nittany Lions. Notre Dame, they're actually at plus 2,000 odds. Should tell you what they think about Sam Hartman. That gives Notre Dame better odds than Penn State, gives them better odds than Florida State, gives them better odds than Tennessee. Vegas likes Notre Dame. Some of it might be the fact that they don't play a conference title game. In my mind, I think that would actually hurt you. But bottom line, the odds have, I believe, improved since they got Sam Hartman on campus. You won 9 games last year, did the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and you did it mostly with a backup quarterback. Notre Dame last year was a team that fought one style, in my opinion, and that was just jiu-jitsu. We're going to play you tough in the trenches. We are going to play stingy defense. We're going to run the football, and we're going to be physical. That's going to be our edge. We're not going to make it a track meet. We're not going to do this whole shootout team that has the ball next wins. That's not going to be how we do things. However, now they add Sam Hartman, and they develop that fighting style, I believe. Because, like I said, you won 9 games with a backup quarterback. You add a guy who's the ACC all-time leader in passing touchdowns with 40-plus games of starting experience. You upgraded at the quarterback position, the most important position in the game of football. It gives me some optimism for them. Now, like I said, maybe Vegas likes that they don't play in a conference title game. To me, it makes me nervous. I feel like Notre Dame, if they have one loss, you feel a little bit more uneasy. But if they go undefeated, I don't know how they get denied. Now, the schedule for them is hard. Their whole thing at Notre Dame is we choose hard. I love that mantra. I think that's great. But for Notre Dame, adding Sam Hartman, to me, very much so, for the reasons I just mentioned, makes them more dangerous because they can win different kinds of games. Marcus Freeman in year 1, a little more pressure now in South Bend. I think making the college football playoff is attainable. Will they do it? We'll see, but I think it's attainable. Sam Hartman changes the entire face of that program. I got 2 Pac-12 teams here to end it for us. USC and Oregon. We'll start with Oregon here. Bo Nix is coming back. The offense should have what you need to win the Pac-12. Now, the offense is obviously only half your team, a third of the team if you talk about special teams that way. The secondary has to get better. Secondary has to get better. You gave up 270 yards through the air a game last year. Let's be real, that cost you the game against Washington. I need to see some improvement on the back end. Whether they do it in the portal, whether they're playing guys that were backups last year and just are more talented. Dan Lanning is a defensive guy, so I think they're going to be able to fix that over the course of another offseason, or at least shore that up a little bit, but that has to be the next step you take. Because the Pac-12, in my opinion, is very winnable. I know Utah's got that thing in a stranglehold for the last 2 years. I know Cam Rising's coming back, but the styles that they play, Oregon and USC, I think, have a good shot to potentially claim the crown. I just believe in Dan Lanning. I believe in his way of doing things. I believe he's building an SEC team in Eugene with how physical they're going to be in the trenches, with how they're going to run the football, and you got the quarterback. That's the biggest thing. You got the quarterback right now. And that's, I think, the same song, second verse I would sing for USC. You got the quarterback. I probably would sing that verse a little bit louder if I'm USC and I got Caleb Williams. We got Caleb Williams for 1 more year in LA. Caleb Williams would likely be the first overall pick in the draft this year. Now, he's got to go to school for another year and do class online or whatever he does for his version of school. Because, I mean, he's managing a lot right now with NIL and with practice. Like, I don't know how these guys have time for school. But Caleb Williams still has another year of school that he has to commit to. He would be the first pick in the NFL draft this year, is my understanding. You have 1 more year of him on campus. Let's not kid ourselves. If you don't get him a defense, if you don't get him something that can win you the Pac-12 championship on that side of the ball, I think you miss your window. Like, this is the window where USC, if they win the Pac-12, they make the college football playoff, they could propel themselves into a whole new tier when they move to the Big Ten here pretty soon. That would change the entire way that we view USC football in the modern era. So for Caleb Williams and USC, it's as simple as the defense. They didn't lose that game against Tulane because the offense didn't do enough. Offense scored over 40 points. You score over 40 points, you should win a lot of football games. And they did last year. But they need to be able to hold something up on the defensive side of things. So for that reason, I'm keeping an eye on USC. As long as you got the best player in the country, you're going to be a team that's capable of taking the next step. So to recap it for you, Tennessee, they can split Georgia and Bama. I think you got a real good shot. Florida State. If you can win the ACC with one loss, I'd like to see you beat Clemson. Jordan Travis taking the next step is a big part of that. I think they have a very good shot to be one of those next step teams and make the college football playoff. Penn State, a lot of their top talent is cycling up. Nick Singleton, Abdul Carter, Katron Allen. You enter into the Drew Aller era. How quickly can he get it going? Can you split Ohio State and Michigan? If you can, you at least give yourself a chance to be in contention for a college football playoff spot. Notre Dame, they add Sam Hartman. I very much so believe they're one of the sneakiest teams in this whole conversation, and Vegas believes so as well, giving them plus 2,000 odds to win the national championship. For comparison, Penn State and Tennessee are both plus 3,000 odds right now. Then Oregon and USC, I would just love to see one of those teams from the best coast make some noise. You got both your quarterbacks, Bo Nix and Caleb Williams, for one more year. Can one of those teams get it done out west and get their team to the college football playoff? Especially USC. You got the best quarterback in the country, nay, the best player in the country. Don't waste that because you didn't have a defense. So USC, I would imagine, will continue to be active in the portal, but those are the teams that I think are very much so sneaky and capable of taking that next step as we get closer and closer to games happening here in the not too distant future. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.